The invasion begins. The night the sky broke open, humanity realized that all its stories about alien invasions had underestimated the truth. They didn't come in silence, nor did they arrive with a message of peace. The first warning was a burning streak that tore across the sky over the Pacific Ocean, a massive vessel larger than any human city breaking through the upper atmosphere. Its black hull glistened with living metal, shifting and flexing like muscle beneath skin. People in California and Tokyo stood in their streets staring upward, filming with trembling hands, whispering prayers or curses. Within minutes, more followed, hundreds of ships descending in formation, each blotting out the stars. Then came the sound. A frequency so low and deep it rattled windows and made blood vessels thrum. It wasn't a weapon, not yet. It was a declaration. A predator's growl, carried across the sky of every continent. The world froze as one. Children clutched their mothers, soldiers tightened their grips on rifles, governments scrambled to issue orders. But by the time humanity's leaders convened, the first orbital strikes had already begun. Meteors of plasma rained down on cities. London's financial district dissolved into molten glass. Beijing's skyscrapers toppled like dominoes under invisible bombardments. In New York, the Statue of Liberty was split in half by a single white-hot beam, her torch falling into the bay with a hiss of steam. Humanity fought back. American submarines launched nuclear-tipped missiles from the depths. Russian defense satellites fired their kinetic railguns. China unleashed swarms of hypersonic drones. The world's militaries, fractured for decades, suddenly fought as one. For a moment, there was hope, until the weapons met alien shields. The sky flared with mushroom clouds that dissipated like fireworks against shimmering barriers. Railgun slugs flattened into harmless sparks. Swarms of drones were intercepted by living tendrils that extended from alien hulls, swatting them down like insects. In less than 12 hours, the military strength of Earth was reduced to rubble. Underground bunkers became command centers. Leaders and generals spoke in frantic voices over dimly lit screens. Maps of the world glowed red as territory after territory fell under alien occupation. No demands, no negotiations. The invaders did not seek to parley. They came to conquer. And in the chaos, beneath a mountain in Colorado, a group of scientists, engineers, and soldiers huddled inside NORAD's hardened bunker. Among them sat a man who barely looked the part of a savior. Elias Rourke was 33, a weapons engineer by training, though most of his colleagues joked he wasn't cut out for the military-industrial machine. Too eccentric. Too imaginative. Too distracted by ideas that were useless. He was the kind of man who scribbled equations on napkins during lunch breaks and stayed up nights working on devices that never made it past the prototype stage. One of those devices now sat in a steel briefcase beside him. It was small. Barely bigger than a shoebox, its casing scratched and uneven from being assembled in his garage lab. No barrels, no warheads, no sleek military markings. Just a cluster of coils, a small battery pack, and a frequency dial. It looked more like something a hobbyist would bring to a science fair than a weapon capable of defending Earth. The generals hated it. "This is what you bring me," barked General Howard, slamming a fist onto the briefing table. His face was red with fatigue, his uniform collar loosened, his eyes bloodshot. "The planet is burning, and you're telling me our salvation is a toy radio?" Elias didn't flinch. His hands trembled, yes, but his voice remained steady. "It's not a radio. It's a resonance disruptor. It emits a frequency most species wouldn't even notice. To us, it's useless background noise. But I've spent years studying the biomechanical harmonics of living systems. If those ships are part organic, as our scans suggest, this frequency can interfere with their neural lattice." The room fell silent, except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the muffled sound of distant explosions through layers of rock. One of the scientists, a woman named Dr. Patel, adjusted her glasses and leaned forward. "You're saying this," she gestured at the box, "could disable their control systems?" "In theory," Elias said. He swallowed hard. "It won't destroy them. It won't blow up ships. But it could confuse them, break their coordination, maybe even paralyze their drones. Just long enough for us to strike." General Howard leaned back in his chair, snorting. In theory. Do you know how many theories I've been handed today? Dozens. None of them stopped the bastards from glassing London. None of them stopped them from turning Paris into ash. He pointed at the briefcase. That thing is junk. A toy. We need weapons, not gadgets. Elias felt his throat tighten, but he forced himself to meet the general's glare. With respect, sir, every weapon we've tried has failed. Nukes, railguns, drones, useless. We can't win by throwing bigger fire at them. We need to think differently. Sometimes the smallest stone shatters the largest machine. Patel spoke again, softer this time. What's the range? A mile, maybe more, with amplification. It's not refined. I didn't design it for battlefields. But if we can get close, inside their shield radius, it might work. The general stood, pacing. You want me to risk what's left of humanity's forces on a gamble? No, Elias said. His voice cracked, but he steadied it. I want you to let me risk me. Just give me a chance to test it. If it fails, we lose nothing. If it works. He let the silence finish the sentence. The room was quiet again. Then came the sound of distant rumbling, the earth itself shaking under another orbital bombardment. Dust fell from the ceiling. The lights flickered. For the first time since the invasion began, Elias saw hesitation in the general's eyes. Not belief, not hope. Just the understanding that every other option had already failed. Finally, Howard exhaled, long and heavy. Fine. One test. But if this doesn't work, Rourke, I'll have wasted time we don't have. And people will die for it. Elias nodded. His hands tightened on the briefcase. He knew people were already dying. The question was whether humanity would have any left to save. And so, while the world above burned, the weapon no one believed in, the so-called weakest weapon on Earth, was carried into the war that would decide the fate of mankind. A weapon no one believed in. The resistance didn't look like an army. It was farmers with stolen rifles, students carrying scavenged drones, engineers rewiring scrap electronics into makeshift bombs. They met in burned-out subway tunnels and crumbling warehouses, speaking in whispers, always on the move. The great militaries of Earth had fallen in a single day. What remained of humanity's defense was scattered, broken, but not destroyed. In the underground bunkers where Elias Rourke walked, faces were gaunt, uniforms mismatched, hope in short supply. He felt the weight of their stares as he carried the briefcase close to his chest. Some looked at him with suspicion, others with quiet desperation. Most simply ignored him. To them, he wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a leader. He wasn't even one of the brave resistance fighters risking their lives topside. He was just a scientist, another man with theories, another voice promising miracles in the dark. The first test came in the ruins of Denver. A scout drone, one of the alien machines shaped like a manta ray, hovered over shattered buildings, scanning for survivors. Its underside glowed with veins of pulsing blue light, like blood moving beneath translucent skin. Every few seconds, a beam of white fire lanced downward, erasing entire blocks into ash. Elias stood with trembling hands inside the shell of a ruined hospital. Around him, a dozen resistance fighters crouched in the shadows, clutching rifles that couldn't pierce alien armor. Their commander, a wiry woman named Sergeant Alina Varga, gave him a sharp nod. "You get one shot," she said. Her accent was thick, her eyes sharper than any blade. "If this fails, we scatter and pray it doesn't notice us." Elias set the briefcase on a broken counter. He unfolded its antennae, adjusted the dials, and switched on the humming coils. The device vibrated in his hands, faintly at first, then stronger, like a heartbeat out of sync with his own. The drone tilted, its sensors sweeping. Its alien optics shimmered with predatory light. "Now," Alina hissed. Elias pressed the trigger. The device sang. It wasn't a sound so much as a feeling. A low resonance that rattled bones, hummed in teeth, and made the air itself seem to quiver. The frequency was almost imperceptible, like the whisper of an earthquake buried deep underground. The drone froze midair. Its lights flickered wildly, pulsing out of rhythm. Its wings twitched, folding in unnatural angles, as though its muscles spasmed. Then, with a sound like metal grinding on bone, it crashed into the street, shattering in a burst of sparks. Silence. The resistance fighters stared, stunned. Elias could hear their breathing, ragged and heavy. The weapon still hummed in his hands, the coils glowing faint orange. Alina broke the silence with a laugh. Sharp, disbelieving. "It worked," she said. She turned to her soldiers. "Did you see that? It actually worked." The fighters murmured, some clapping each other on the back, others shaking their heads in awe. For the first time in days, their faces weren't painted with despair, but something else, something Elias hadn't seen since before the invasion. Hope. But it didn't last long. "Don't celebrate yet," Alina warned, her smile fading. She pointed to the sky. "We just killed one scout. There are thousands more. If they trace the signal." As if on cue, the air trembled with the roar of engines. More drones appeared, circling the skies, searching. Alina barked orders, and the fighters scrambled. Elias slammed the briefcase shut, clutching it to his chest as they ran into the labyrinth of ruined streets. For hours they darted between collapsed buildings, moving like shadows while the sky swarmed with hunters. At last, they found refuge in the sewers, the stench of rot and smoke filling the air. There, in the dim light of cracked flashlights, Elias faced their questions. "What is it?" one fighter asked. "How does it do that?" "Why doesn't it destroy them?" another pressed. "Can it work on the big ones, the ships?" a third demanded. Elias answered as best he could, his voice steady even though his hands still shook. "It's a resonance disruptor. Their technology isn't purely mechanical. It's bioneural, organic components fused with machines. My device interferes with the signals that keep their systems synchronized. Think of it like static in their nervous system. It doesn't kill, but it confuses them, breaks their control." "So it's not a weapon," one man muttered. "It's a distraction." Elias nodded. "Yes. But a distraction may be exactly what we need." Alina leaned against the wall, her arms crossed. She studied him for a long time before speaking. "You said it doesn't kill. But can it be made stronger? Scaled up?" Elias hesitated. In truth, he hadn't built the disruptor for war. It had been a research project, a curiosity, something he tinkered with late at night. Its power source was fragile, its range limited. To scale it would require resources, time, and stability. Luxuries the resistance didn't have. But as he looked at the tired faces around him, as he remembered the burning cities and the screams from above, he realized there was no choice. "Yes," he said at last. "It can." The following days blurred into a rhythm of desperation. The resistance smuggled Elias across battle-scarred states, protecting the briefcase like it was humanity's crown jewel. Every test brought new results. Drones fell from the sky. Patrol walkers froze mid-step, their limbs twitching before collapsing. Word spread quickly. Soldiers whispered about the toy weapon that could cripple the enemy. Scientists began sending Elias scraps of alien tech, scavenged from fallen drones, to study and refine the disruptor. But the aliens noticed. Each test drew more attention. Squadrons of ships swept lower and lower, blanketing the ruins with hunting beams. Survivors were dragged into orbit, never to be seen again. And then came the day the resistance tried it on something bigger. Outside the ruins of Kansas City, an alien troop carrier descended, its shadow stretching across the broken highways. Its hull pulsed with light, veins of alien energy surging as hundreds of soldiers poured out. The resistance was cornered, outnumbered, and surrounded. Alina turned to Elias, her voice hard but steady. "Now or never, scientist." Hands trembling, Elias extended the disruptor's antennae, cranked the dials past their safe limits, and pressed the trigger. The weapon screamed. This time the resonance wasn't subtle. It shook the earth, made the air ripple like water. Resistance fighters clutched their ears. The troop carrier froze mid-descent, its landing gear locking in place. Alien soldiers staggered, dropping their weapons as their armor spasmed with twitching lights. Then, in one terrifying, glorious moment, the entire carrier crashed sideways into the ground, crushing its own troops beneath tons of metal and flesh. The battlefield went silent. The resistance fighters cheered. Alina raised her rifle in salute. For the first time, they had turned an alien weapon against its masters. And Elias Rourke, the man who had brought Earth's weakest weapon to a war for survival, realized the truth. The aliens were not invincible. Their strength was their weakness. Their living machines, their neural bonds, their reliance on harmony. Every part of it could be undone. Humanity had found a crack in the armor of gods. The spark that broke an empire. The Kryth were a species that prided themselves on inevitability. Where their legions marched, resistance always broke. Where their war fleets appeared, worlds fell silent. To them, Earth was nothing more than another primitive outpost to be added to their map of conquest. But in New Delhi, that arrogance would meet its first fracture. The city was already a scarred battlefield. Entire neighborhoods had been reduced to ash by orbital strikes, their skeletal remains smoldering under a gray sky. Families huddled in ruined subway tunnels, surviving on whatever rations could be scavenged. Above ground, the resistance fought not for victory, but for every extra day of survival. The Kryth knew this and treated the battlefield like a game. Their soldiers, clad in chitinous exo-armor laced with glowing conduits, marched openly through the streets. At their sides lumbered war beasts, towering constructs of flesh and circuitry, bristling with plasma cannons and energy shields. Entire regiments of Earth's armies had been wiped out by a single one of those monstrosities. And yet, in the shell of a collapsed hospital, a group of humans waited. Maya Ortiz crouched behind a broken wall, her hands trembling as she checked the power couplings on a weapon that shouldn't even have existed in this war, a crude, repurposed EMP bomb. "This is insane," muttered Rajesh, a resistance fighter cradling an old assault rifle. "We're betting everything on something that doesn't even kill." Maya didn't look up. "That's the point. It doesn't have to kill. It just has to stop them. Long enough for us to do the rest." Behind them, Captain Ibrahim, the leader of this cell, studied the advancing Kryth column through cracked binoculars. The aliens came in neat, terrifying order, 6 war beasts, flanked by dozens of soldiers, weapons glowing like molten fire. Ibrahim's jaw tightened. "If this doesn't work, none of us will live long enough to regret it." The Kryth marched closer, the ground trembling with the thunder of their machines. The resistance fighters held their breath. Maya clutched the detonator in both hands. The EMP was crude, jury-rigged from old power grid capacitors, military scrap, and pieces of downed drones. It wasn't supposed to work. But she remembered what she had seen in London, when a damaged transformer had sent a surge that froze a Kryth beast midstep. That moment had burned into her mind, a revelation. The Kryth's strength was also their weakness. They weren't pure flesh, nor pure machine. They were a fusion of both, and that fusion made them vulnerable to the very thing humans had dismissed as outdated. The column entered the kill zone. Ibrahim gave a sharp nod. Maya pressed the trigger. The world went silent. For a fraction of a second, there was no sound but the faint hum of the device. Then a pulse of invisible energy rippled outward like a shockwave. Blue arcs of static danced along the ground, sparking against ruined cars and shattered lamp posts. The Kryth war beasts froze midstride. Their glowing eyes flickered once, then guttered out. Plasma cannons dimmed. Shields collapsed like broken glass. The towering constructs let out eerie, distorted shrieks before collapsing in heaps of twitching flesh and dead machinery. The soldiers staggered, their armor stuttering with sparks. Weapons fell silent, their barrels venting smoke as power drained away. What had marched as an unstoppable legion was now still. Rajesh's jaw dropped. Holy, it worked. But there was no time to marvel. Ibrahim roared, "Now! Hit them while they're blind." The resistance surged forward. For the first time, they weren't running, they were charging. Gunfire rattled through the ruins. Bullets that once bounced off glowing shields now ripped through Kryth armor. Fighters hurled Molotovs and grenades, the explosions tearing into the immobilized ranks. Human voices, shouts, war cries, even laughter, rose against the shrieks of aliens who had never known vulnerability. Maya stayed back, staring at the sight she had unleashed. A single pulse, and the impossible had become real, humans standing toe-to-toe with their conquerors. She hadn't built a weapon of destruction. She had built a weapon of denial. She had stolen the Kryth's certainty. One of the war beasts shuddered, its systems struggling to reboot. A plasma cannon began to glow faintly, building power. Maya's heart clenched. It's waking up. Before fear could take hold, Ibrahim sprinted forward with a satchel charge, leaping onto the beast's side. He jammed the explosive into a seam of its armor and hurled himself away. The blast tore through the construct's chest, sending pieces of burning metal and flesh raining across the street. The beast let out a final roar before collapsing for good. The fighters cheered. For the first time since the invasion, they cheered. But this wasn't just one battle. Word traveled fast, carried by desperate radios and whispered across hidden networks. In Moscow, resistance fighters detonated a stolen EMP device beneath a patrol of Kryth soldiers. In São Paulo, engineers wired an entire block with jury-rigged pulses that shut down a garrison overnight. In Cairo, a single old military EMP shell disabled an alien carrier ship in orbit, sending it crashing into the desert. Everywhere, humans turned primitive static into their deadliest weapon. The Kryth were thrown into chaos. Their commanders barked orders through comms that no longer worked. Their soldiers, bred to dominate, found themselves fighting with nothing but claws and bare strength. And for the first time, humans were faster, hungrier, more ruthless. The war was no longer a massacre. It was a rebellion. In the ruins of New Delhi, Maya stood among the fallen machines, her hands still trembling around the empty detonator. The battle was over. The resistance had won. Ibrahim placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice low but steady. You didn't just win a battle, Ortiz. You lit the fuse for a war the Kryth can't win. Maya looked at the broken forms of their enemies, machines that had once seemed like gods. It wasn't power that beat them. It was weakness. Our weakness became their weakness. Above them, the clouds parted just enough to reveal a glimpse of the stars. For the first time since the invasion began, those stars no longer felt like chains. They felt like a future. And far above, on Kryth command ships, alien strategists stared in disbelief at the reports flooding in. Entire fleets disabled. Outposts falling. Weapons useless. The unthinkable had happened. The empire that had never known defeat was losing.